Welcome to this discussion on L-Tyrosine dosing, with a specific focus on the often repeated research dose of 100 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. This dose sounds very precise and that can make it feel authoritative, but precision does not automatically mean it is appropriate for everyday use. In this presentation, we're going to separate research context from supplement label hype. L-Tyrosine is not caffeine and it does not usually provide a dramatic stimulant kick. It is an amino acid precursor that may be useful in specific stress-based situations where cognitive performance is under pressure. The key question is whether a large acute dose is solving an actual stress-related bottleneck or whether people are chasing a general focus effect that tyrosine was never meant to deliver. We will walk through dosing, research context, label reality, safety considerations, and practical decision-making. This slide frames the central question. A dose of 100 milligrams per kilogram is often discussed because it appears in research on stress and cognition. However, that does not mean it should be treated as a casual daily recommendation. Many stress studies use gram-level acute doses because they're trying to test a very specific question. Can a large amount of tyrosine help preserve cognitive function when stress is actively draining catecholamine resources? That is very different from taking tyrosine every day in a pre-workout blend and expecting instant focus. Most commercial products use much lower doses, often just a few hundred milligrams, which may not match the research context at all. The real question is not simply, is 100 milligrams per kilogram good? The better question is, what problem am I trying to solve, and is stress-related cognitive decline actually the issue? This slide highlights a major disconnect between research dosing and commercial supplement labels. In acute stress cognition studies, doses around 100 to 150 milligrams per kilogram are common. For an average adult, that can mean several grams in a single dose. By contrast, many pre-workout or nootropic formulas list L-Tyrosine in the range of a few hundred milligrams to perhaps 1 or 2 grams. That is a huge difference. A product may include tyrosine on the label and imply research-backed focus benefits, but if the amount is far below the tested range, the claim becomes much weaker. A tiny amount hidden inside a focus blend does not mean the formula is research-matched. Dose matters, but so do timing, stress context, tolerance, form of tyrosine, and the user's individual physiology. The label alone does not guarantee functional support. L-tyrosine is a non-essential amino acid found naturally in protein-rich foods. The body can make it from phenylalanine, and it also comes from foods like meat, fish, eggs, dairy, soy, nuts, and legumes. Its relevance to focus comes from its role as a precursor to catecholamine neurotransmitters, including dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine. These neurotransmitters help regulate motivation, alertness, attention, and stress response. However, this does not mean taking tyrosine forces the brain into a high-focus state. It simply provides raw material that may support neurotransmitter synthesis under the right conditions. That distinction is important. Tyrosine is not caffeine. It is not a classic stimulant and usually does not produce an obvious buzz. Think of it more as a potential support tool when the brain's stress response is under strain. Tyrosine becomes most interesting when stress changes the demands on the nervous system. Under low stress conditions, catecholamine supply is usually not the limiting factor. If you are well rested, well fed, and already focused, adding more tyrosine may feel subtle or do nothing noticeable. Under high stress conditions, the story changes. Sleep loss, cold exposure, noise, intense pressure, long decision-heavy tasks, or fatigue can increase catecholamine demand and make cognitive control more fragile. In those conditions, the brain may rely more heavily on dopamine and norepinephrine systems to maintain attention and working memory. This is where tyrosine may have a plausible role. The value of tyrosine is not that it always boosts focus. Its value is that it may help when stress threatens performance. This slide is important because tyrosine is often misrepresented. It is not a universal daily nootropic. It is not a stimulant in the same category as caffeine. It is not a strength supplement, a hypertrophy supplement, or a direct muscle growth tool. It is also not a treatment for ADHD, depression, anxiety, chronic fatigue, or any medical condition. The best way to think about tyrosine is as a context tool. It may be useful when stress is the bottleneck, especially when cognitive performance is slipping because the nervous system is under pressure. But if everything is normal, your sleep is good, your diet is adequate, and your stress level is low, tyrosine may not have much to do. This is why supplement labels that market it as a broad focus booster are often overstating the evidence. This slide lists the situations where tyrosine has the most plausible use case. Sleep loss can degrade vigilance, reaction speed, and working memory. Cold exposure and loud noise can make cognitive tasks harder by increasing physiological stress. Tactical or combat-style training combines fatigue, pressure, movement, and decision-making, which can strain attention and memory. Long periods of high workload can also reveal deficits that are not obvious during normal testing. These contexts have something in common. Stress is actively challenging cognitive performance. That is different from taking tyrosine before a normal gym session where you are rested, fed, and simply looking for a stimulating buzz. Tyrosine is more relevant when the problem is stress resilience than when the goal is basic workout energy. This slide explains the bottleneck model. Acute stress increases catecholamine demand. When that demand rises, attention and working memory may start to suffer. Tyrosine may help by providing precursor material for dopamine and norepinephrine synthesis when those systems are temporarily under strain. The key word here is may. This is not guaranteed, and it does not mean more tyrosine always equals more focus. It means that if catecholamine synthesis becomes a limiting factor during stress, extra tyrosine might help preserve function. This is different from a stimulant model. Caffeine directly changes arousal by blocking adenosine receptors. Tyrosine provides building blocks, and the body still regulates how much neurotransmitter gets made and used. That is why context matters so much. The bottleneck must exist before precursor support is likely to matter. A dose of 100 mg per kilogram means 0.1 grams per kilogram of body mass. That may sound small as a ratio, but in real grams it becomes large quickly. A person weighing 60 kilograms would take 6 grams. A person weighing 80 kilograms would take 8 grams. A person weighing 100 kilograms would take 10 grams. Those are large acute doses compared with most supplement labels. Many pre-workout formulas use less than 1 gram, and even more robust formulas often stop around 2 grams. So when someone cites the 100 milligrams per kilogram research dose, it is important to translate it into real-world amounts. This is not a tiny sprinkle of tyrosine. It is a scoop-sized dose that may affect comfort, tolerability, and practicality. This slide reinforces how body size changes total exposure. The same body weight-based dose creates very different gram amounts for different people. At 60 kilograms, 100 milligrams per kilogram equals 6 grams. At 80 kilograms, it equals 8 grams. At 100 kilograms, it equals 10 grams. This matters because larger gram doses can increase the likelihood of gastrointestinal discomfort, nausea, heartburn. It also means two people following the same research-style dosing equation may have very different practical experiences. The heavier person may not just be getting the appropriate dose. They may also be facing a much larger burden on digestion and tolerance. Body weight dosing can be useful for standardizing exposure in research, but it does not automatically make the dose comfortable or suitable for everyday use. This slide compares typical supplement amounts with the research-style dose. A typical label might contain half a gram of tyrosine. A more robust formula might contain 2 grams. But 100 milligrams per kilogram for an 80 kilogram person equals 8 grams. That is 4 times a robust 2 gram label dose and 16 times a half gram label dose. This gap is critical. A formula can list L-Tyrosine and imply stress-cognition benefits, but if the dose is dramatically lower than the studies it references, the formula may not be delivering the same effect. This does not mean low doses never do anything, but it does mean you cannot automatically apply research findings from high acute doses to a small label amount. The label dose must match the evidence context before claims become meaningful. Many stress and cognition studies use high acute doses of L-tyrosine, often around 100 to 150 milligrams per kilogram. Some protocols use multiple grams in a single sitting, and a few use repeated or divided dosing around the stress exposure. The goal is usually narrow. Determine whether high acute tyrosine can offset stress-related cognitive decline. That is not the same as asking whether a small daily tyrosine dose boosts focus during normal life. This is where supplement marketing often stretches the evidence. The research dose answers a specific question under specific conditions. It does not automatically justify taking large amounts daily, and it does not prove that a small amount in a pre-workout blend will reproduce those effects. Research context matters as much as the dose itself. Some research protocols use divided dosing or split portions around stress exposure. For example, studies involving physiological stress may describe a total amount of 100 milligrams per kilogram, with portions administered around the stress event. Splitting a large gram dose can make practical sense because it may reduce stomach discomfort. However, divided dosing in a study does not prove that all lower daily doses work the same way. It also does not prove that a small amount taken in a supplement blend will match the effect of a full acute research dose. The practical implication is that splitting can be a tolerability strategy, but it is not a universal shortcut. If the goal is to replicate a stress-cognition protocol, dose, timing, and context still matter. One classic research context involved healthy adults performing cognitive tasks under loud noise stress after taking 100 milligrams per kilogram of L-Tyrosine. The study found improvements on some stress-sensitive cognitive tasks, while mood, systolic blood pressure, and heart rate did not meaningfully change. This finding supports the idea that tyrosine may help protect cognition under acute stress, but the interpretation must be precise. It does not prove that tyrosine improves focus in all situations. It does not prove it enhances mood. It does not prove it improves physical performance. The value appears to be stress-specific cognitive protection. This is exactly why context is the central theme of the presentation. Tyrosine's best evidence is not more focus for everyone. It is possible support when stress is actively degrading performance. Another notable context involved military cadets during demanding combat-style training. In that study, a tyrosine-rich drink was used during a stressful operational setting, and the tyrosine group performed better on memory and tracking tasks. This is a promising example because it resembles the kind of high-pressure environment where catecholamine demand might rise. However, we need to be careful. The intervention contained protein plus tyrosine, so it was not a clean single-ingredient pre-workout test. It also involved operational stress, not a normal gym environment. The outcome tells us that tyrosine may be helpful when stress, fatigue, and decision-making collide. It does not mean that tyrosine will improve every workout, every study session, or every mood state. Once again, the evidence points toward targeted use under stress rather than broad daily stimulation. A rapid evidence review found that tyrosine may benefit cognitive performance under stress, but the evidence was not strong enough for broad, confident recommendations. This is a balanced and important conclusion. There are positive findings, but the studies vary in design, dose, timing, stressor, and cognitive tasks. Some results are encouraging, while others are mixed or null. That means tyrosine is not a proven universal focus enhancer, but it is also not useless. It sits in a middle category, promising for specific stress contexts and deserving of more research. For practical use, this means you should not expect a guaranteed effect. Instead, consider tyrosine when the situation resembles the research context: acute stress, cognitive strain, fatigue, cold exposure, or high-demand decision-making. A key review conclusion is that tyrosine may be most useful when dopamine or norepinephrine are temporarily depleted or challenged. That fits situations like stress, fatigue, cold exposure, and high cognitive demand. It does not support tyrosine as a universal daily nootropic. The mechanism makes sense. Tyrosine provides precursor material for catecholamine synthesis, and under stress the demand for these neurotransmitters can increase. But when the system is not stressed or depleted, extra precursor may not change much because the body tightly regulates neurotransmitter production. The AOF reading is simple. Use tyrosine when the bottleneck is stress resilience, not because a label uses the word focus. This framing prevents overhyping the ingredient and helps users match supplementation to the right problem. When the goal shifts from cognitive performance under stress to physical exercise performance, the evidence becomes much weaker. Reviews generally do not support tyrosine as a reliable exercise performance enhancer. It may help attenuate cognitive losses in stressful environments, but that is very different from increasing strength, muscle growth, sprint power, or endurance output. This distinction matters because many pre-workout formulas blur mental focus and physical performance into one claim. Tyrosine may have a plausible role when stress threatens attention, reaction time, or decision-making, but it should not be positioned as a muscle-building supplement or a direct performance booster like creatine, caffeine, or beta-alanine. The practical split is clear. Cognition under stress is plausible, physical performance is weak, and muscle growth is not the target. This slide challenges the assumption that higher doses are automatically better. Some research in older adults found that higher doses, such as 150 to 200 milligrams per kilogram, were less favorable than 100 milligrams per kilogram for difficult working memory performance. That does not mean 100 milligrams per kilogram is perfect for everyone, but it does show that dose response is not always linear. More precursor does not always mean better neurotransmitter function. The brain regulates uptake and conversion, and too much can create side effects or transport competition with other amino acids. This point is especially important for people who escalate doses just to feel something. Tyrosine is not meant to produce a stimulant sensation. The goal is enough support in the right context, not the highest possible gram amount. There are several reasons higher doses may not produce better outcomes. First, adding more precursor does not guarantee that more dopamine or norepinephrine will be made because the brain regulates neurotransmitter synthesis. Second, amino acids compete for transport across the blood-brain barrier, so extremely large doses may not translate into proportionally greater brain availability. Third, baseline stress state matters. If catecholamine demand is not elevated, extra tyrosine may not have a meaningful role. Fourth, side effects can increase with gram-level dosing, particularly nausea, heartburn, headache. The AOF rule is simple. Escalating the dose just to feel something misunderstands how tyrosine is studied. Tyrosine should be used as targeted support for stress conditions, not as a high-dose stimulant substitute. Individual variables shape how tyrosine performs and how well it is tolerated. Body size changes the total gram dose when using a milligram per kilogram approach. Stress level determines whether catecholamine support is even relevant. Meal timing matters because protein and other amino acids can compete for absorption and transport, possibly altering the effect. Age may influence plasma response and cognitive outcomes. Medication status is also critical because tyrosine may interact with thyroid medications, MAOIs, levodopa, or other treatments. This slide reminds us that the same dose does not create the same outcome for everyone. Practical use requires personal context. A dose that makes sense for a sleep-deprived tactical operator may not make sense for a rested gym goer doing a normal workout. Large tyrosine doses can be difficult to tolerate. A 100 mg per kilogram dose can mean 6 to 10 grams or more at once, depending on body weight. That amount may be uncomfortable, especially for users with sensitive digestion. Possible side effects include nausea, heartburn, headache, fatigue, and general gastrointestinal discomfort. Splitting the dose may improve tolerability, and taking it with food may make it easier on the stomach. However, these strategies can also change absorption and may not perfectly match fasted research protocols. Comfort matters because a supplement that causes stomach distress may hurt performance more than it helps. The practical takeaway is that gram-level dosing is not trivial, and users should consider both evidence matching and real-world tolerance before trying large acute amounts. Lower doses of tyrosine are more practical and are often easier on the stomach. That is one reason supplement labels commonly use smaller amounts. However, lower dose practicality does not automatically mean lower doses are equally effective. Many of the strongest stress-cognition studies use large acute doses. If a product contains only a few hundred milligrams, it may not match the protocols that produce benefits. This does not prove lower doses never work, but it means we should not assume that some tyrosine equals evidence-based tyrosine. The key distinction is that better tolerated does not automatically mean equally effective. For casual daily use, lower doses may be acceptable, but for stress-related cognitive support, you need to consider whether the dose and timing match the evidence. This slide compares 3 possible strategies: a single large dose, a divided dose, and a low daily dose. A single large dose may be closest to many acute stress protocols, but it can be uncomfortable and may not be necessary outside stress contexts. A divided dose may improve tolerability by spreading the total amount across time, but it is not proven equal in every context. A low daily dose is easiest for labels and users, but it may not match the research dose used in studies showing stress benefits. The right strategy depends on the problem you are trying to solve. If the goal is acute stress support, timing and total dose matter. If the goal is everyday comfort, lower dosing may be more practical but potentially less evidence matched. A transparent label should clearly state the form and amount of L-Tyrosine. A problem label hides tyrosine inside a focused blend, nootropic blend, or proprietary matrix. If the dose is hidden, you cannot compare it to research. If the dose is very small, it may be label decoration rather than functional support. This slide highlights a common marketing problem. Formulas borrow claims from high-dose research while using much lower, sometimes undisclosed amounts. For example, a 500 mg label dose is not the same as 100 mg per kilogram. If an 80 kg person would need 8 grams to match that research dose, 500 mg is only a fraction of the studied amount. Serious supplement evaluation requires transparency, dose matching, and context. N-acetyl L-tyrosine, often called NALT, is a modified form of tyrosine. Some labels use NALT instead of L-tyrosine, but the two should not be assumed interchangeable gram for gram. A formula cannot simply use NALT and borrow claims from L-tyrosine research unless the evidence matches the form, dose, timing, and outcome. This is especially important because different forms may differ in solubility, metabolism, and delivered tyrosine availability. Transparent labels should clearly state the form and exact amount. If a product switches forms but still references research on L-Tyrosine, that is a reason to ask harder questions. The AOF take is straightforward. Form matters, dose matters, and evidence cannot be borrowed casually. Tyrosine is an amino acid found in food, but high-dose supplementation still deserves caution. People with thyroid disease, hyperthyroidism, or Graves' disease should be careful because tyrosine can relate to thyroid hormone pathways. It may interact with thyroid hormone medication, MAOIs, and levodopa, psychiatric medications, pregnancy, cardiovascular concerns, or complex medical histories require professional guidance. Tyrosine should not be used as a medical treatment for depression, ADHD, anxiety, chronic fatigue, or any other condition. This slide is a reminder that amino acid does not automatically mean risk-free. Supplementing large gram amounts is different from eating normal protein foods. When medications or health conditions are involved, medical clearance is the safer path. Taking tyrosine with food may improve stomach comfort for some users, especially at gram-level doses. That can be helpful if large acute amounts cause nausea or heartburn. However, food introduces a trade-off. Other amino acids from protein can compete for transport, and that may change how quickly and effectively tyrosine reaches the bloodstream and potentially the brain. This means food strategy is a tolerability tool, not a guarantee that the dose will match fasted research protocols. Comfort matters because a supplement you cannot tolerate is not useful. But evidence matching also matters if you are trying to replicate a study outcome. The best approach depends on your priority: tolerance, research similarity, or practical convenience. The final verdict is balanced. A dose of 100 milligrams per kilogram is a real research dose, and it may be useful under acute stress conditions where cognitive performance is threatened. It is not automatically needed for daily focus, and it is not a proven physical performance enhancer. The most defensible use case for L-tyrosine is stress-related cognitive support, not general stimulation. If your goal is a caffeine-like kick, tyrosine is the wrong tool. If your problem is sleep loss, cold exposure, noise, pressure, or heavy cognitive demand, it may be worth considering with careful attention to dose, timing, and safety. The AOF decision rule is simple. Use tyrosine when stress is the problem, and do not confuse research dosing with everyday label hype.